Next, I'd like to welcome Matt Twomey, who's head of marketing at Anritsu, and he and I are going to talk about automation first.
Hi,
And
Annie.
hi, Matt, welcome to you. Um, I guess maybe the first thing would be for you to introduce yourself a little bit before we get on with our conversation.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, for those who don't know me, my name obviously is Matthew Toomey. I work in Anritsu Service Assurance Division. I'm the head of, I suppose, marketing and I suppose have responsibility for product marketing as well. I've been working in the service assurance space for more than 20 years now. So things have changed a lot, but we still have some of the same problems, amazingly enough, 20 years later. But I suppose that's the introduction for me.
Okay, well, Matt, thank you very much. So let's get to it. So can we start by you telling me, in your view, what you see as the difference between insight and action, which when we were discussing this beforehand seemed a bit obvious, but actually maybe
Yeah,
not as much as you'd think.
yeah. So this is the place I suppose that we agreed to start because I wanted to give people some concept here of understanding maybe a future journey for them to around automation and autonomous networks, and I think this idea of insight on one hand and action on the other hand is a good place to start. So the insight, the service assurance for the last 20 years has been looking to deliver insight. So looking to find out what's wrong on the network. And in nearly all cases, with a few notable exceptions, the service assurance part and the network operations part, they didn't take action. They delivered the insight for someone else to take the action. But however, they've always taken credit for the action. They've always said, well, look, we fixed this problem, we reduced mean time to resolution, by this percentage. But it has all been driven from an enhanced insight on the network of knowing what happened. And the insight over the years has certainly gotten, much better. It went from kind of error-based detection to like patterns and anomalies of problems that people are finding. Um, the the actions um, the actions then I'll give you a good example. We have an operator in the Middle East, and they've been taking actions based on our anomaly data since 2019. But we in our marketing material, we take credit for those actions. And I think this is an interesting dichotomy. There's another story from another operator in Japan, a large Japanese operator, and they're taking our insight and they're putting it into a 11 of an automation system, and they've asked for more insight. And they're like, look, the automation system is pretty, I suppose, static or dumb in a way. It's some flow based, and your insight is what drives the actions we take. So if we can get better insight from you, then surely our actions are going to be better. And this sounds really reasonable. It sounds sensible. This is coming from one of the largest operators in the world, and you're kind of going, okay, I agree with this. And they presented this at one of our large customer events, and I agree with it. However, what I'm going to suggest today is that maybe that's wrong, and and that is it's an interesting thing, it's an interesting thing to try and tell your customers, are you wrong there? Are you sure you need more insight? And the point of it is to take an action. To take an action, what does it mean? Like when you take an action, where does it go? Who do you engage with, and how do you make sure those actions are going to work? One of the reasons I think the more insight all the time response is not necessarily, it might be correct many times, but why it's not always going to be correct is that you don't necessarily have a closed loop coming back into this insight to find out whether or not the action worked as it should. You don't necessarily know whether in our service assurance systems, we'll take credit for all the good things that happen. But if they take an action and it didn't work, well, we supply the insight. We'll just take credit for the good stuff. So it's the management and the understanding, and if you like, the governance of the actions is something that is something that's new in service assurance space. I know there are automation systems in network operators for years, and I remember speaking with one of the large automation vendors a number of years back, and asking them about whether or not they can take actions based on like individual customer experiences. And back then, a number of years ago, the answer was no. And I think the answer is still no. And a lot of a lot of the people in the service assurance space, you'll hear about automation, you'll hear about the actions they're taking, you'll hear about reductions of 90% of the workload. But when they say that, what they mean really is that they're taking rather simplistic cases of like network elements, services that are showing a problem, and that they're doing remediations, relatively simple remediations quickly. And that stuff's relatively straightforward in a way. It's not high volume data. It's easy cases. And the next place, so where I'm saying the insight versus the action, where this place needs to go to is when your actions are going to be done on a per customer basis. Then what's really needed is you need to come back in a closed loop basis, back to your insight and go, the action that I took, did it work? The action that I took, did it have any downsides? The action that I took, did it interfere with any other previous actions? The action that I took, has it aged out? And so what is becoming clear to us, and look, we're having some conversations with partners and internally around all of this sort of stuff, is that though we are like, our business is the business of delivering insight, that is let us that is the main business. But what we're understanding now is that that insight has always been thrown over this virtual wall. And what happened over that wall, we took credit for, and who knows. I think that wall needs to come down, and the ownership and the governance of those actions needs to come back, especially from a network operations perspective. They need to have this power to understand and have closed loop from the insight and the actions together.
So really, insights are no guarantee of automation, or the right automation, or the best automation. And we need
Yeah,
to
well,
stop thinking that one is an automatic solution somehow
well,
for
well, well, let's
automation.
imagine. Yeah, you're dead right. If the insight we have, like in the Japanese context, and our insight, and I'm making up numbers now, but let's say the insight is 90% efficient efficacy rating of 90%, and they ask us for more insight. And in that insight, we bring it up to, let's say, 92 on this imaginary metric of making it better. And it does get better. And we use AI, ML, more advanced techniques to make the insight better, to make it more timely. However, what happens if the action, if just knowing and understanding the impact of the action as it's taken means that you could use insight that's at 70%? What happens, like, you could be putting all this effort on this insight side, whereas like a governed action means you can take way more actions because you have rollback, you have failback, you will have a closed loop. And so as soon as you take an action, if it doesn't work, you kind of go, okay, stop that now. And so you literally can take more actions. And if you imagine, you know, taking this down to the subscriber level again, and taking it down to individual problems. Currently, no one's going to see an individual problem going, I'm taking an individual action for that. Absolutely no one, because it's like, that'll go through care, go through some assessment. But the only way you can start to build towards that, is by building up an understanding of insight and action together with a closed loop. This is the kind of current concept we're working towards here, to try and understand how to do this.
And
For me,
sorry,
yeah,
I was
yeah.
gonna say, I imagine even failed automations are probably quite educational.
They can be, because you will understand when you fail in an automation, the automation, it, from an insight basis, if the automation fails, you'll understand how effective the insight is. But from an automation basis, if it fails, you should have management and governance to be able to recover. And so
Yeah.
in a way, I think these are two different domains, and And us in service assurance taking credit for the other domain, I think is very interesting.
Okay. I think there's some edginess around third parties taking actions and automation on operators' networks. So why would we trust Anritsu, say, more than ourselves, if you like?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. The reason to trust us around taking actions with customer experience data is that we are like for the most kind of granular data you can get on the network. It is pro-based, software pro-based, or a data collector, whatever you wish to call it, based. We get tracking of all the control plane and potentially user plane data. So we see a full story of the customer experience. So why would you trust us to handle the automations then? Is that when we take an action on, let's say, a group of customers, we will see within a minute, 30 seconds, a minute on whether or not that action is working as it should. And so that's the feedback loop has to come back via us. You could potentially use us for that, but we will have that understanding of the data and the customer experience really clearly. When I want to make it clear too that the actions, the automations that are going to be taking, this isn't about us necessarily taking them. There's a level of nuance here in that it is us kicking them off. There are other systems. There are other like systems in OSS, BSS that take actions, that make network corrective changes, that make subscriber changes. We are not going to be those. That's the likes of your Blue Planets and others. They will be something that we will integrate with, if you like. They're going to be at the edge of like we wish to take this action. We will need to hear back from them. Yes, we've taken that action. The action worked as a appropriate. Here's your information back. So there need to be some closed loop here. But the driving of those actions, and particularly from a customer level basis, will come from us.
So
Um,
really, we're talking about an ecosystem of automation, really, to turn insights into action. There's a
yeah,
whole
Yeah,
kind
so there's going to be for me. So network operations have, coming from our data, coming from other data from other suppliers as well. They have a huge rich set of data, like that is useful to the rest of organization, but they don't necessarily have full ownership of taken actions because there's other teams, other departments. Many, I'm speaking to many operators at MWC. A lot of them are have either set up an automated network operations team, and you really need to have a dedicated team to do automation. It just doesn't work without it. It can't be a part of someone's job because like it needs to be a dedicated team. So they're either setting the team up or they have an idea of that they're going to do it. And so that team is getting set up and they have a few requirements then to be able to take some of these actions, some of these automations. So it comes down to what like how is it that they get to like how do they get the power to be able to take actions? How does the rest of the organization trust them to take actions? And so when it comes to the insight again, like they kind of go, look, we have all this insight. Let us take actions. And the rest of the organization might naturally say, kind of go, yeah, but how do I trust that the insight is 100% if efficacy? There's no 100% efficacy on anything. So you're kind of going, okay, so what happens to the 3% or the 10% of times where it doesn't work? And you kind of go, oh, we'll figure it out. This again, you're coming back to genuine questions from the rest of the organization where you need to answer. And then you're back into right now, we need to take that wall that we're throwing the insights over. We take that down and we need to go further along in owning, managing, and governing the actions.
So I guess maybe to some extent we've already sort of touched on a lot of reasons for my behind my next question, which is what stops operations teams from setting up automated actions today? And it sounds like partly it's many departments involved and who has the right and how many people need to be consulted.
Yeah, I've asked this question of everybody. It's like what stops you from taking automations today in
Yeah.
network operations, and there are many answers, and none of them are particularly wrong. I have a favorite one which I'll get to at the end. But my the first one can be money. So the buy-in from the organization going, right, we need to do this. That tends to come, the need to automate some of these manual processes. Just everybody knows this is on the road, and we need to move there. They talk about processes when they say processes, they mean how do we deal with all the other departments. I want to make this change. This change can affect the network. So it's a serious change, let's say, or it can change the configuration. So how do we get that where we can do it without like going through approvals? And that's a real that's a real frustration for network operations teams, where I heard them talk about, right, we did this use case, and this use case made this change. Then we have this other use case, and we have to deal with another department, and they can go through months of like negotiations, considerations, technical assessments of what might end up being, Python scripts to call a change into another part of the network. And so when I hear Python scripts, I'm like, well, okay, cool. You're doing some coding, but what I don't hear is repeatability, management, control. I hear that there's a guy, Bob, over there who wrote a Python script and it worked on a Wednesday. And is it going to work all the time? I don't know. So the again, we probably underline what might be one of the issues. Another real kind of process issue for them is for those who didn't have an automation team. And I mentioned an automation team is really, really critical. Focusing on automation, it is a particular and different domain. You're dealing with instead of time series data, you're dealing with flow-based data. You need to understand how to take different data into and how to action it. So not like the move. Sometimes they'll move some people in and go, look, you focus on automation, you try and automate. But again, without the expertise, without the dedication, without the ability to interact well with the rest of the organization in an understood framework, it can be very difficult to push this along. So it can feel like you're like a Sisyphean task of pushing the boulder up the hill without getting anywhere. Now the my answer, I had this as a trick answer for people. My answer to why operations teams don't are not able to roll out loads of automated actions today. And when I say loads, I mean thousands. I don't mean 10. I don't mean 20. I mean thousands. I mean a network that sees customer experience and will react based on all that you know and all that you can learn, and take thousands or tens of thousands of actions. And how could you get there? And for me, the answer is trust. And so there needs to be trust. There needs to be trust in that the action, we come back to management and governance, that the action can be trusted. And so the 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 idea we had for this, and it aligns very closely with what we found out how partners work, is that you have like a two-tier system. The tier one is the people who create automated actions. These are the people who understand the network, who have an ability to like sandbox these ideas and go test, kind of go, right, before we let Bob in network operations, in automated network operations, take an action, he will only have a list of a certain number of actions he can take. And so there'll be metadata within those actions, but it'll be well described, well-known actions that he can take. So you create a kind of a good use case, or a good automation library that you can use. And so then those automations can be used with the metadata flexibility that you have all the time, because they're well known, they're trusted, they're understood, they've been tested, they have failback, rollback, and anti-collision. All of those types of checks will be in there.
So it seems to me that repeatability and reusability are really key. You don't want to keep doing lots and lots of different things. You want to get the maximum benefit from everything that's proven. So
Yes,
that
yes,
seems to me one thing. And also then you don't have to keep going through this huge palaver.
yes.
The other thing
Yeah,
that's
the palaver is real. The frustration of engaging with even people in your own team. I'm sure we all get it, but like doing that on a repeatable basis is hard.
And the other thing that's really struck me, Matt, is how many times you've mentioned governance.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I did a big piece of research, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago. And I started off with the feeling that governments was a necessary evil, and ended up with the idea that actually, if you did it well, it was a real huge boost to your business because most people make such a mess of it, and yet it's critical.
yeah. I mean, the governance is a synonym for trust here for me as well. In that, I'm talking about the throwing over the wall, but we're throwing over the wall, and nothing from our service assurance perspective, nothing's governed. Like what the operator does and the success they have and how they do it, and whether they use Python scripts and whether like those Python scripts are manageable, maintainable, repeatable, how they like when none of those things are known. And so when it like in that level of uncertainty, if a different department goes, you're going to affect a thing that's really critical to my business drivers, and I don't understand your process. I don't understand how, if something goes wrong, you'll be able to recover, or that we'll be able to see the problem. And they are really, really good questions for things that are mission critical, that need to be up all the time. And so I think for me, the governance is key. Um, the the other part as well, and so like looking into the future for looking into the future, I mentioned thousands, tens of thousands of automations, and you probably notice that I didn't mention AI or anything yet.
We were coming to that.
Yeah, yeah, I know we will, but like when for these processes, we'll talk about the AI, but for those processes, like if you have 50 automations, you might have people that will be able to do it. If you have 1,000, if you have 10,000, that the people you've replaced the manual operations problem with an automated operations problem, and you need probably the same amount of people. So you're kind of going, okay, so now I am doing more. I'm automating on a more granular level. I have customer experience and individual customer insight, but now I have like tens of thousands of these automations, and I don't know how they work together. I don't know how they understand each other. And this is like the level beyond where you will need different techniques, AI, ML, like AI learning to be able to
So we
understand.
haven't really cracked the issue of scale, it sounds like.
So I think that this is a far more manageable issue once you have the governance and the management inside, because it's an automation domain. It's a slightly different domain, but driven out of the foundational data that I've been talking about. And excuse me, to put AI on top of that is going to be far more well understood than putting AI on top of the likes of, like, Python scripts or long run processes that take 3 months for approval. This is the difference. So I just want to bring it back to yeah, before we go on to the other ones, I want to bring it back to that Japanese customer. Now they're brilliant. Don't get me wrong. They are absolutely brilliant in what they're doing, but they were like head down facing a problem, starting with roamers and then moving into their whole network, doing customer experience based automations. And they went, we want more insight. And you're kind of going, okay. And they want more insight to make the automation, like they took the wall down, but like it's still going into this automation flow. And the insight helped them get better results. And they saw the better results. But what they weren't considering though is that maybe you could take way more insight that's less quality and fix the automation. They didn't want to touch the automation. They saw the limitations of the automation and went, well, the only thing we can improve is insight here. They didn't want to improve the automation because that supplier that supplier wasn't necessarily service assurance specific, didn't understand the domain specific, and so there was limitations to the flexibility there. And so their response wasn't wrong, but it didn't look up. It didn't look up and kind of go, right, where will this be in a couple of years? We could have thousands of things here. We need this side, not this side, to be better, to be more aware, to be more intelligent.
So that kind of brings us to our final question, really, and also we've got one from the audience. Um, and looking at the differences in your approach to AI when you divide the world into insight and action. And I mean, I guess you can turn that look through both ends of the binoculars at that, really.
Yeah, so this is there's we have interesting discussions here internally as well about where to put the bets, and it's ongoing good discussions, healthy discussions to get to the right answer. And so like around Insight we're working on using knowledge graphs, this old Google, not old, but like kind of cool Google technology to look at vast data sets to understand things like network observability, um, you know, um, full network observability and connect everything in and to be able to understand it. And these are good, challenging AI things that will deliver more insight. And we're going to, it's our bread and butter. Like if we don't have insight on the data, the foundational data, and I mean, we need to have better insight. And that is one domain. And for me, that is like the AI on top of like time series plus data. In the middle, well, in the automation side, I think there is loads of new AI for service assurance to do. And I talked about things like when you have, let's imagine 1,000 automations, imagining like, are those automations aged out? Are those automations clashing with each other? Can those automations be combined? Like, can they be rationalized to make them more efficient? And so those things at 1,000 automations will not be done by humans. They will have to have AI and AI enhancements. I can imagine. And as we move through technology, those AI enhancements needs to understand the technology updates as we go, need to understand things like private networks, edge networks, all of those things will like when you make a change and you affect somebody like a VIP or somebody in a private network, you have to know. And so you have, again, your automations won't work unless you have this customer experience at some point. And this will be something we will all get to. So,
Now,
so
Matt,
the
there's a kind of perceived chasm, and I think actually Appledore, and we're going to have someone from Appledore on our chairing our final panel. But there's a sort of perceived chasm between level 3 and level 4 of the TM Forum model for
yeah,
automated networks. And I'm just wondering how much AI plays into that.
this is
Or does it fall into the chasm? I don't
so
know.
I've chatted to the guys about this exactly, and they have it as a chasm, and we had it as a gap. I think a chasm might be a more appropriate word.
Mm.
And when you look at that chasm, and if we go back to our original metaphor of insight and action here, an awful lot of people are going, well, if we just start automation, we'll get across the chasm. And I'm kind of going, well, I don't know. If and then another perspective is if we just have insight, more insight, better insight, then we'll get across the chasm. And you're like, no. So it's going to be more insight. It's going to be automation, but it's going to be customer experience data. And then we're going to come back to this idea of management and governance to get across. You need to be able to scale the insight actions that are going to
Yeah.
come across. And that's what I think you mentioned, that the scaling aspect.
It's the scaling that seems to me to be really critical.
Yeah, it's all those things. It's like that. If you imagine that chasm, how do you get across it? It's insight, action, automation, scaling, governance, and then it's only when you start thinking about it, kind of going, okay, that's it, because there's so much, like there's going to be so much that you can do with this customer level insight from an automation basis. You're going to have a trusted, scalable system that can do it.
Okay,
Um,
Matt, we've got a question from the audience, which I'd like us, or like you, to tackle. It's all very well for me sitting here. Um, so Nick asks, what in your experience are data elements key? So which data elements are key in your experience for customer experience and operations efficiency? And this is an area where telcos are really struggling today, and they say, "Oh, it's complex." Well, everything is.
yeah.
Uh, but what in your
So,
experience
so I have
are
a
the data elements?
I have a very biased hat in that I worked for a service assurance company who does data collection via probing. And so I thought like at the start of 5G that maybe all of this probing would go away, there'd be a better way.
Ah,
In fact, there still isn't a better way. It's got more complicated and probably like retrograde in some ways. But the insight for top tier operators who want to deliver the best insight, you still need to probe your network. And this is the most granular data and the data that's linked to your customers directly. And so for me, it's only now that I suppose our technology can start facing towards that challenge of how can we deal with customer experience on an individual basis and automate. So for me, I am waiting. And searching the market to see how could this in any way be replaced, and or scaled down even. And I don't think there is a way to do it yet. I could suggest though, like, if you could imagine automation in a few years' time, and we have a super massive automated process that's trusted, and so like things are happening in your network and being fixed really. You could imagine then an operator going, I'm going to turn off a lot of those virtual collectors and just do 20% of the network overnight. Because if something happens, like if we see it, and do lighter monitoring for the rest. And then if we see something happening, we'll scale them up, and then we'll run into a full automation process. I think the funny answer to be able to get to less resources for probing is to probe and automate, and then eventually you'll be able to decide when you want to gather all that data, because there is a cost to doing that, of course.
Matt Twomey, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure, as
Thanks,
always.
Annie. Pleasure to chat to you again.
Thank you.